first began withdrawing from society at a very young age, eventually leaving school at 15. It wasn't until I was 20 that I began to re-engage in society. I started looking at job opportunities, but found that without my leaving cert, there wasn't any job opportunities that I could take that would really allow me to go somewhere with my life. So I started looking at internships. I thought maybe there might be something here. But I actually needed a degree in order to get a decent internship, one where I would be challenged, one that would engage and motivate me, and most importantly, one where I could learn. So I took a step back. I thought, what is it that I want to do with my life? Where do I really want to go? I had two main passions. The first was ethnic integration. The second, event management. I just moved back from Barcelona, where I'd lived for 2 years. I lived with friends of mine from the Gambia and Senegal, and I witnessed and experienced extensive racism, from our neighbours to the local shop owner to even the police. Coming back to Ireland, I was very passionate about ensuring that migrants in Ireland didn't experience the level of racism in which I had experienced abroad. I was also very interested in event management. From the time I was a kid, I was running the bake sale, doing a charity fundraiser. I'd even spent a short period of time running events in nightclubs. So this was definitely a part of my career that I was interested in looking at. So I began to investigate volunteering opportunities. I thought I could find a position, one where I could contribute my experiences from both event management and my experiences of racism, and make a difference in society. I began investigating the integration sector and seeing what was available. But the more I researched, the more I realized that there was an actual gap in the market. In Barcelona, the most damaging part of racism was not the overt racism. It wasn't the ignorance. It was feeling disconnected to the community, feeling unwanted and not belonging. So I had an idea for an intercultural festival. A festival where we could come together with the diverse cultures living in our city and have a chance to share food, learn about each other's cultures, maybe play some music together. It was a simple concept, but it meant connection. So I set about establishing an intercultural festival in Dublin city centre. While I was setting this up, I was doing extensive research and networking and getting to know different people around this and telling different people about this concept. I got a huge amount of encouragement and enthusiasm and support. And it made me think that there's something in this idea. And next thing I know, I'm CEO of a social enterprise, BlueFire, that creates integration through the arts and community engagement. One of our projects is the BlueFire Street Fest, an intercultural festival that brings different cultures together. But the funny thing about deciding to establish my own social enterprise is I never actually made that decision. At no point did I go from the idea of running a festival to going, I'm going to run a social enterprise. I don't ever remember making that decision. It just happened. It grew organically. And next thing I'm going from saying, hey, I run this really cool festival, to hey, I'm CEO of BlueFire. So luckily for me, I was quite delusional at the time. I remember that first festival, and I had images of red carpets, the paparazzi were going to come, the politician was going to cut the red ribbon. It didn't quite transpire. I believe my colleague called it a very fancy garden tea party, which I think was an accurate description. But do you know what? That was actually one of the blessings of what we did, because in that, what I learned was that the community, it has to be the root of what I did. And in that, in seeing the reduced scale, and it wasn't about the bright lights or the shining pop stars, it was about local bands and local people coming together and connecting. I began to get a good understanding of what I wanted to create and how I wanted to contribute to the city. So when I look over the past 2.5 years, and what have I learned through being a social entrepreneur, there's 4 key things that always strike me. The first is vision. You have to know where you're going and what you're trying to achieve. I remember about a year into setting up BlueFire, one of the artists we work with had a friend who had recently ended up homeless. He knew that I knew a bit about how the system worked, and he asked for my help and support as my role in BlueFire to help his friends. As a young person, who wanted to do good, I was very happy to offer my services. And I spent the next 2 weeks getting this person support. And I don't regret that. I'm glad I did it. I've helped that person. But what it actually did is what digressed me from what my real vision was and what my real role in society is. And it stopped me reaching a vision that can impact thousands. And that's why it's really, really important to know where you're going, because doing good or having good intentions is not enough to drive real change in our communities. The second thing we need is determination. Setting up my own social enterprise has been the most challenging thing I've ever done. Coming from a background where I had, left school at 15 and I had no contacts and very limited work experience, I had to learn everything from scratch. And for anybody setting up their own business, particularly in those first couple of years, you are a jack of all trades, You're doing the fundraising, you're reaching out to people, you're building contacts, setting up a board of directors, stakeholder management, these things that I'd never even heard of before. I had to learn the difference between profit and loss. But, you slowly learn it and you slowly build up your skills. I remember a year ago having this absolute epiphany that I'd take on tens of volunteers, the workload would be spread, and suddenly I wouldn't be under so much pressure. Next thing, for 4 months, I'm managing what felt like hundreds of volunteers, struggling to meet everybody's expectations. And that's why determination is so important, because, it's a very challenging journey, but when you have that vision and you're determined to go there, you find a way to make it happen. The next is resilience, and it very much falls in line with determination. This journey has knocked me down more times than I can count. One thing that always strikes me was stakeholder management. I remember interacting with the local council. It was the events department trying to get our festival off the ground, and there was so much red tape. And all I could think was, here I am, with a good heart, trying to make a difference, and all you're doing is closing doors in my face. Now, what they were actually doing was challenging me to get to a higher standard that I needed to reach in order to run an event safely in the city centre. But for me, I felt like somebody was saying, I don't believe in you. I'm not going to support you and I'm not going to back you. And I remember after one particular conversation with the council, I got off the phone and I fell to my knees and I just cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. And I didn't know which way was right and I didn't know which way was left. But within a half an hour, I was back up on my feet and I was brushing myself off and I was getting back to work. Resilience doesn't mean you never fall, but it means you pick yourself back up and you move on. The last thing that I really want to talk about, and I think it's probably been the most important message and one that I've only learned in the past year, and it's often overlooked when we hear about entrepreneurial stories, it's the importance of stillness. What does stillness mean? I think stillness means, a walk in the park, or in this context, I mean a walk in the park, a cup of tea. It means sitting down and thinking, connecting with yourself, and finding the answers within. Because the answers to everything, and I mean everything, is within us. Now, how can everything be within us? For example, if I'm having a HR issue and I sit still, I will find the answers. But that also relates to if I'm sitting for 4 hours doing my accounts and I cannot work it out and I take that 10-minute break, suddenly I realize that I do not have the competency level to do accounts. And I realize, and in that moment, I realize that I need to seek support. And I go and I phone somebody and I ask them to help me with the accounts. People often ask me, how can I have achieved so much without an education? Mark Twain said, I don't let my schooling interfere with my education. I am an educated young woman. Life has been my education. Mentors have been my educators. Colleagues have been my educators. I have been my educator. I am a self-employed intern. Thank you.